have the privilege of getting to meet and photograph the people that I'm asked to photograph. I've wanted to do this since I was a teenager, and I went to school for it, and then I assisted the best photographers in the world who do this kind of stuff, all the way up to Annie Leibovitz, and then I went out on my own, and people started asking me to do the thing. So I'm here now, a couple of years in, and I'm excited that I've had the privilege to work during the COVID era.
Well, what were some of the challenges that you ran into on that? Just, I mean, I've done some in studio things with hair and makeup and all of that, and it was quite a challenge because, of course, you're in someone's personal space, or at least your makeup artist is. And talk to me a little bit about how you conceived the shoot for Charli.
Yeah, I think that when I got asked to do the shoot with Charli, I knew that everything would need to be simplified and stripped down. I think that with anything involving Corona and COVID, exposure and minimal exposure to other people is absolutely essential and key. So the first thought that went through my head and was told to me by my editors at the Washington Post was basically, can you just do this by yourself, and really strip all extraneous personnel out of it. What can we do with the bare minimum? And that was my mindset from the outset. Usually my mindset is really about solving the problem of a limited amount of time that I have with the subject and trying to make the best picture I can make within a whole host of pretty complicated structural concepts as far as constrictions of time and space and unknown, a lot of curveballs. And this was, okay, I might have all that stuff, but since it will still be challenging, what can I focus on doing that I know I can get accomplished by myself? And as far as you're asking directly about hair and makeup and styling, I knew that that was not going to be happening. And so it was really key. I mean, I got a little lucky with Charli, to be honest. I mean, she's a 16-year-old who's very on top of her own makeup, hair, and styling. And she's also an extremely public figure who puts a public face on every day. So I wasn't worried about the hair and makeup on this specifically. I was prepared to ask for things if they weren't in a direction that I thought would be good. And we did do that. We made some minor adjustments, but I didn't see the need, especially given everything going on, to ask to bring a hair and makeup person or ask for her to make sure she had her own. I was confident that she could do it herself.
Well, I've seen her views on TikTok, and she's really very animated, and your photographs bring that out. I want to show a couple of them now, but before I do, one of the things that strikes me now, as you can probably tell from the white hair and the gray beard, that I've been around photography for a long time, and I remember working on film. And so I'm curious, I don't really ever want to go back. That said, I'm exploring adding grain to my images now. When I was doing it, I was going, how do I get rid of this stuff? So I've really come full circle. Why do you have this amazing respect and regard for film? And of course, I've got to ask, which emulsion are you using?
Yeah, a lot of questions there. I mean, I've always been in love with film. I mean, I came of age in photography in a really transitional time for the industry at large. I went to college in 2004, and that was right during the transition to digital, really. And I exited colleges in 2008, and that's when digital had pretty much taken over. So my formative years on learning about photography was in itself a transition with the industry from film to digital. And I saw things changing so fast in the digital sphere that, the one constant I always had was my film camera. And as technology improved and changed, I kept going back to my Hasselblad and taking pictures with my Hasselblad as well as digital. And it really, I think, anchored in me a sense of consistency in my work, in my voice, and knowing that this really well-made, designed German box from 1960 something, it's not going to change. and therefore it will keep a consistency in my work. And some of the images you're about to show of Charli, black and white film, look like some of the very first pictures and portraits I ever have taken. And I could put them next to each other and they would stand together as a singular vision and a singular voice. And that's what really, really attracts me to film, is the ability for it to be a vessel and a tool for me to use to keep my work consistent over the long term.
Well, I want to show a couple of those pictures. So let's take a look. Here's one right here. And this is really, I love it. I love the grain. I love the lighting. Tell me what you think about this.
I'm seeing your browser here.
You're seeing my browser. You're not, okay. Thank you. Let me do a new share and get to this one. And there you should see it.
Yes, there we go.
Okay. So now I've had a little look at the behind the scenes photos, so I know how you did this. But before we get into the technique stuff, and I'm thrilled, by the way, that you have a love of Hasselblads. I've had one my entire photographic career. So
yeah, me too.
I know exactly what you mean. And for anybody that wants to shoot film, they're incredibly inexpensive to buy right now. And they were the price of good digital cameras back then. So
oh yeah,
I encourage people. So talk to us about this photograph of Charli.
Yeah, you know, this is just, if you were about to pick a picture of that from this shoot that is most a Jesse Dittmar photo, this is it right here. I mean, it's just right in my wheelhouse. I think there's a real true intimate connection going on between me and my subject here. We're both really focused and in the moment, and it feels to me just really, really natural and connected. And that's what I'm really going for, is a connection and humanizing quality from all my subjects that I get the privilege of standing in front of. And that's what this image speaks to me about. I mean, as far as technically going on, I mean, yeah, I'm using my standard film stock, which is Ilford 3200. It's a very grainy film. It's funny because you were saying how you're trying to get rid of grain early on, and I want more and more grain. I shoot the grainiest film there is, and I also grossly overexpose it to provide even more problems for my lab and my development team, because I like to make it look weird, and I like to make it look organic. I mean, there's a lot of organic qualities in this image as far as the grain structure goes, and as far as the visual components go, and that's very much on purpose, because it I think reflects back on my overall thematic goals of feeling natural and connected and authentic. Everything I do aesthetically is hopefully highlighting and kind of putting those goals on a pedestal.
Okay. So here's another view. And I love everything about it. And I had no idea. I was thinking, oh, maybe HP5, a 400 ISO film. And I'm really excited that you can do this. I'm not going to. I've paid my dues. I've spent enough time in the darkroom that I'm through. But I think it's really great to see people shooting film again. And I love the look that you see here with the shadows of the trees. And we'll get into how you did this in a minute. Now, did you use any fill here, or is this just open sky?
Yeah, there is some fill, absolutely, but the primary light source, like you said, is open sky. It's blue sky. I've learned a lot by shooting out in the sun and what it means to be in the shade, what it means to be under cloud. When you're out in a big open space, where your light source is coming from. And my objective, typically with a shoot like this, is to use that big, gorgeous blue reflector of a sky that's just bouncing all the sunlight into your subject. It's my favorite way to shoot outdoors. And that's exactly what you see here. I'm compensating a little bit with what you'll see behind the scenes, that the big sunbuster umbrella, but to add some fill. But you're definitely mostly looking at sky here.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And so I've always been 100 ISO guy since I've been shooting digital. What's it like to be at 3200 outside? I mean, your exposures must be really, super fast shutter speeds, I would imagine.
No, I'm pushing the film ISO. I'm grossly overexposing. You know, I keep
Okay.
my general rule of thumb is that I keep my shutter speed and my aperture where I like it, and then I just tell my lab what the ISO is exposed for, and then they push and pull in relation to that. So I kind of treat it like a studio setting, and I know that it's going to be very overexposed. I think what I really like about the Ilford 3200 film stock is that it's extremely versatile. You know, I think it's properly rated around 1250 if I was to guess. And I have gotten usable exposures beyond 100 ISO. I mean, probably closer to like 75 ISO. So, I mean, they are hefty, they are thick negatives.
They're thick, aren't
But
they?
yeah, they would be. And you know, I always get a little of a what were you doing from my lab when that happens. But I would say on average, I'm exposing around ISO 400, and it's just really helping utilize as much of that emulsion as possible. And you can really see it here in the skin tone and in the background tone. You can really feel that grain.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of thing that you won't get out of using Ilford HP5100. You know, it's going to look smooth and like digital, and if it's going to look smooth, you know, why not just shoot the digital, in
Well,
my
and we'll
opinion.
get to digital. I think the next frame is digital. This is interesting because at 400 from 3200, if my calculations are anywhere close, that's 4 stops overexposed. So that's significant.
Yeah, totally.
That's
And
the kind of
that's the
negative that,
factory rating.
yeah, that's the kind of
That's the
negative
factory rating.
that if I had it in my enlarger, I would turn it on, go to lunch, and come back and turn it
Yeah,
off to make the print.
yeah, which I'm okay with. You know, it works for me,
It obviously
and
works for you. It works really well for you.
thanks, Kevin.
You know, I mean, this is something, you know, again, being a commercial guy, having to rate films exactly. Well, I do my tests. My Tri-X 400 was closer to 250 when I did the tests for the way that I
Yeah,
processed film. But that, we don't need to get into that.
sure.
I love the idea that you can actually take the film, overexpose it so far, scan it. I mean, I'm assuming you're scanning here
Yeah, yeah, we
because
are.
you're still delivering
And
digital files.
I am delivering digital files, and you know, we're not working with color slide film here, you know,
Right.
and nor would I. You know, this is really a I only took one roll of Charli. That's 12 frames, and it was 2 outfits over that one roll. So we're talking like 6 frames per outfit here. This is a shot at an organic artistic process that is trying to come up with something that feels spontaneous, that allows for happy accidents, that allows the physical object of the Hasselblad 500C is a talking point and a point of focus in and of itself. You know, someone like Charli's never seen a camera like that before,
Right.
and someone who has seen a camera like that before has not seen it in decades. And so there's an immediate weight and focus that comes over the session at large when I break it out. And especially in contrast, I think that if I was shooting film the whole time, you know, you'd become a little desensitized to it as a subject and as the photographer. And I break this thing out as a punctuation mark to help really focus in on a connection between my camera, myself, and the subject.
And it's probably pretty obvious that you didn't shoot Polaroids ahead of time. You took your light meter reading and went to it, huh?
Yeah, I use my digital camera as a light meter
Sure.
in this scenario. You know, you have to work with what you can do, and it just is the easiest, most convenient thing.
Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next frame. Now, this is digital.
Yeah. Now we're moving on to digital. Yep.
And you can really see the difference. I'm going to go back to the other one for just a second. You can really see the difference. This to me is a lot more romantic. It's a lot more approachable. It's still a great photograph, but the digital you know, like I said, I'm exploring grain, and I find that digital is a little bit, it's cold. It's too good.
Yeah, it's very it's hyper real. It can be hyper realistic, especially in the more recent style that's been kind of popularized. I would say we're kind of diverging from that a bit, I think, as an industry at large right now, back towards the organicness of grain. But certainly in the mid teens and throughout the 2010s, I'd say, you really had this hyper realism. You had HDR becoming very popular, et cetera, et cetera. And so it has that, you know, the medium at large lends itself towards perfection and hyper realism, except, you know, and that's not something is super attractive to me.
Well, let's take a look at another one of the digital images. Again, your sensibility carries through no matter which
Thank you.
medium you're using. And I think that's a real tribute to you.
Thank you. Yeah, and you know, I just consider them to be two different tools. You know, the digital, I love digital too. I mean, I think that I certainly would, I rarely, if ever, I can't remember the last time I did a shoot where I did not shoot some digital. There's high value in digital photography from a whole host of perspectives. But the images are distinctly different, and I think they say a bit different things, even though they seem to be from the same. They're different tools used by the same person, and I think that hopefully that's getting through.
Oh, I think that you've got a really amazing body of work here.
Thank you.
Before we get into some housekeeping stuff, I notice you have a book behind you. Would you like to reach over and grab that and tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, there's only a couple copies left. Like I said, this is my first book of my work from 2014 to 2016. It's on tothebook.com, TWOthebook.com. There's really only, even though I have a couple copies behind me, there's only, I think, 2 for sale left of the signed and numbered, which are the only ones that are still for sale. These are going to be kept by my studio. So, you know, it's about 50 or 60 portraits of some very fascinating people: Tom Hanks, Patti Smith, Dave Grohl, and Lupita Nyong'o, on and on. Judy Blume. You got authors, artists, actors, musicians, scientists, playwrights, and you know, every CEOs. All, you know, we got Leonard Lauder in there. It's just a kind of, it's an amazing experience for me to have that object and be able to look back upon the breadth and variety of people I get to meet in my job and get to know really intimately, briefly. You know, there's a real intimate connection made when you get to stand very close to someone, which is ironic because we're talking about a shoot in which I wasn't able to stand that close to someone and get to speak with them and connect with them.
And we want to get into that right after I have a few words for our viewers. Photo Focus is running, well, we're just turning 21 years old, of providing free providing free photographic education to anybody that comes to the website. And we're celebrating by running contests every month with great prizes. And all people have to do to enter is go to photofocus.com/celebrate and give us your email address, and you'll immediately get a free photo toolkit that has lookup tables, styles. It's got some amazing camera profiles for using in Photoshop and Lightroom to make really great beginnings of modifications of things using the develop module in Lightroom or Camera Raw in Photoshop. So there are a lot of free tools there, and I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. So at least go sign up and get your free photo toolkit. And now I'd like to get into the behind the scenes. So once I saw this, I started smiling really big, because I use a lot of movie tools in my photography as well. Can you tell everybody what this is?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a view where we are in the yard, looking back towards the house, so we kind of can see that, you know, just in general, telling the story of the shoot. I went to Charli's house. We were, you know, I was told that I would be have only access to the backyard, nothing indoors, and we wanted to make you want to be safe. So I was, you know, quite a bit away from the house, and this is where I set up. I found this really beautiful kind of partially shaded area, and threw up this 8x8 frame, 8 foot by 8 foot frame, with a 8x8 bleached muslin canvas silk here, and and that is what I use as my backdrop. I mean, I use this technique quite a bit. It's my favorite type of backdrop to use that is this tone. I love the texture and the way that it kind of eats up light. It has no sheen whatsoever. It's extremely flat, and it is, you know, not entirely opaque either. It's just a really high quality tool that you can use both as a backdrop and as a light modifier. In this instance, I kept it alone as a backdrop, but it's a beautiful piece of equipment. It's a type of canvas, really.
Well, now, who makes this?
I believe Matthews makes it.
And
Matthews makes the bleached canvas muslin, and then I think that the frame is, oh Jesus, I think the frame is I have it back there. I'm not going to remember what kind of frame it is.
Okay, well,
but there's many different kinds. It's lightweight. I used to have the steel Matthews 8x8 frame, and it was very heavy. And I travel so much that we just said, why do I need? I'm not often in, you know, I'm not often in areas where I need this level of durability. My shoots are very quick, and usually I have a lot of safety precautions and personnel helping me. So we went with a lighter weight frame, a scrim gym, I want to say. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a lighter weight frame, still very sturdy.
How big is it?
It's 8x8, 8 foot by 8 foot.
Well, I noticed that you're protecting against the wind, and you're using proper sandbag technique.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was a really key for this shoot in general. I don't own sandbags. I own a couple of shop bags that are, I think the heaviest shop bag I have is 15 pounds. And I have a couple of smaller shop bags for basically for extension and boom arm situations. But I don't own sand because, like I said, usually my shoots are very, very quick. They're up and down, and my assistants are typically my mobile sand unit to make sure that things don't fall over. And so, you know, I had to make sure that was one of the first things I knew I had to rent. I was like, I'm not bringing an assistant to this shoot. I can't. So I got to get myself some sand, and that's what you see here. You know, I've got probably 2 or 3 bags on each stand there. I think they're 30-pound bags, so that's quite a bit of sand. And even then, it was quite windy. So until we shot, I definitely had the bottom of the canvas untied so that air could move more freely through it, and it wasn't a completely solid sail.
Well, it's really amazing, you know, because a lot of people just throw the sandbag over the edge of the leg. They don't realize that you've got to actually have it off the ground in order for it to work. And that's why
absolutely
I was complimenting you on your amazingly good technique.
Well, that comes from my assisting days, Kevin. I mean, I assisted for 5 years, all the way up to Andy Leibowitz. I was taught early on that if the sand is touching the ground, you're losing a lot of the effectiveness of the gravity of it. And so, yeah, when you can, you want that sand off the ground as low to the center of gravity of the object as possible. We'll make it as sturdy as possible. And you also, if you're talking about assisting technique here too, which this shoot definitely brought me back to all the things I learned assisting, because I had to utilize all that. The legs are pointed against the wind here too. The wind was flowing through the backdrop here towards me. So I have the legs pointed towards me because they are going to provide the most leverage, as much leverage as the sand, most likely, in stopping the canvas from falling over.
Right. And I'm figuring you drove there in your car, your pickup, or your van.
Yeah, I rented an SUV for this, so I got to go see what a rental car situation was like in the Corona era, and that was quite interesting. I mean, I didn't have to go into the little office. They pulled the car up, and right before I walked in it, you know, they gave it the whole thing a Windexing basically on the inside, a Cloroxing. It all felt very you know, clean and smelled like a freshly cleaned bathroom or something like that. You know, it was all on the up and up. But yeah, I rented a car and then went out to the rental house Adorama, picked up my two key pieces of equipment that I don't usually bring, which is a ton of sand, and I also rented a 70-200 Canon lens because I was supposed to, you know, part of the rules that we set, the ground rules that we set, were to stay 10 feet away from each other, not just 6 feet away from each other. And so I knew that, you know, typically I'm very close to people, so I wanted to bring that long lens so I could still get that headshot that you saw in the previous frame from a safe distance, and using the longer Canon lens was really instrumental.
Well, and this is a really good example of what you were doing here. And I'm assuming this stayed exactly the way it is throughout the entire shoot. You didn't move it around.
Yeah, I didn't move it. No, didn't move this, but exactly, you're right. This picture is taken from the same exact area, different camera, and about probably an hour and a half later. So you can see that sun really coming, you know, into the frame a bit more as opposed to the behind the scenes shot. And we're also dealing with, you know, this is taken with my DSLR, and the previous shot, I believe, may have been my iPhone. So you're seeing a bit different of the quality here, but yeah, it's basically the same before and after right there. There you go.
Well, you mentioned earlier the film camera you use, the Hasselblad. What is your DSLR of choice?
I'm using Canon right now, Canon 5D Mark IV. I think it's a great camera, but I use all kinds of cameras, to be honest. I'm not a camera loyalist. I've tried Nikon out. I just don't find that there's too much of a discernible quality difference between the two. I think that mostly it's an ergonomic difference and whatever feels best and is most natural in your hand. So for me, that's Canon, just because it's what I've been using the longest. But I've used such a variety of cameras. I use the right tool for the job, Kevin.
There you go.
And most of the time that's Canon and Hasselblad, absolutely.
There you go. So just real quick, I want to go back. You said this was an hour and a half after the black and whites. So let me just go back. And
oh no, hour and a half after the behind the scenes shot that you showed.
Oh, okay.
The shoot itself probably took place over around 40 minutes to an hour. So this was earlier on in the shoot, that the image you're looking at right now. We did this look first.
Yeah. Well, you can see the light has changed because you can see the shadows of the leaves behind the diffusion panel. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it was different as the time went on, for sure.
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about shooting outside. That is a studio guy I can't stand. Now, you did mention, let's go to this. You did bring along, it looks like a flash.
No, this is a Sunbuster umbrella, diffusion umbrella. It's just an umbrella. It's enormous. It's hard to see the scale here, but I think it's a 7-foot umbrella. It's just huge, and it's a wonderful piece of equipment. I love this piece of equipment. Typically I use it to make the sun into the shape of a softbox, and I put someone under it and use it as a light source. But in this shoot, it didn't really work out for that to be a shot that I wanted to take. So I ended up using it as a giant reflector, as a giant soft white reflector. I changed the angle of it compared to this shot that you see right here. I lowered it and made it more head on. And I walked it as close as I could get it up to the shot of Charli against the 8x8 and just use it as some extra fill.
So those are in the black and whites.
Yeah, and all, I mean, it's, the sun was moving around, but yeah, I just wanted to bring some light source and reflectivity closer to her to give it a little bit more pop.
Right. So you here you're using it as a background, and then you're using the umbrella as the fill.
Yes,
I love
this
this.
is different.
This
Thank you.
is, when I saw these BTS, I thought, what a brilliant photographer you are. And I'm not,
Thanks, guys.
I'm not giving you false flattery, because I saw how you did this. And I think most people would think, okay, we take a regular picture and then we blur areas of it in Photoshop. And that's not what you did. You created something really insanely clever. It's this.
Thank you. Yes.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's a piece of plexi, a piece of just clear plexi with some vellum tape to it, and I'm shooting directly through it and letting the vellum kind of. And you know what I'm also doing, which I don't have a picture of, but you can kind of see it, that green little leaf behind it as well. I'm also using to shoot through, and that's what's giving the previous shot that little green leaf on the right. It's about at like 2:30 on this picture.
Right here. Can you see my cursor?
Exactly. Yep, that's it. I'm using that to also obfuscate and partially block my lens to give this blurry kind of effect that you're seeing.
Let's go back to the picture so people could see what we're talking about.
Yeah. So on the left there, you're seeing a little bit, the less green part, you're seeing a little bit more of the glass and the vellum, and then on the right, you're seeing a little bit more of that leaf. And that's just kind of just popping them in front of my lens and allowing really a lot of, allowing a lot of flare to happen, and also some blurriness and some kind of like a tunneling effect.
Yeah, it's very creative, and I think it's just brilliant. It's wonderful. I love it when we can do it all in camera, and it works well in black and white.
Yeah, I think so too. Thank you. Yeah, it's great. You know, I think it's it's just another tool that I like to use. I think these are all tools. I'm going into a situation like Charli's backyard, in which I've never been there before. I didn't have the opportunity to get any scouting photos or any behind the scenes or any. I didn't know what I was walking into. I mean, I grew up in Connecticut in the town very similar to her, so I had a general sense of the environment, having lived there for so long, and I had a pretty good idea of what I would walk into, but I didn't know for certain. And so when that happens, I think when you have that level of uncertainty, it helps me to be prepared for multiple different ways the shoot could go. And I think having kind of tricks up your sleeve and different ideas that have nothing to do with the subject or the environment, but have everything to do with you and you can control them, are really important. So you know you have some ideas to fall back on in case you get thrown a curveball that you can't control.
Well, before we go any farther, we've got some participants with us live, and I did promise everybody a chance to ask questions. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can either raise your hand or you can type your questions into the Q&A pod, and we'll get to those now. We'd love to do that. And I can also allow you to talk. So if you'll raise your hand, let me know. And otherwise, we're going to continue on. So let's see, the next picture. Pardon?
I'm just making sure that I have it as well over here.
Yeah. So this again is using that vellum and plexiglass, and it's
as well as the leaf.
Yeah. Normally we see people doing really strong backlit photographs, and they don't think about how it really destroys the picture of the person. Here you've done a great job of managing your flare, which I think is, I mean, it's one of the best examples I've ever seen of it.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, I mean, when I saw this picture, I was like, this is, it's essentially exactly what I was envisioning before I went to the shoot. So it's always exciting when you get to walk away from a shoot going, hey, I had this vision in my head of what I wanted to accomplish, and I did that. And that's what this picture is. The whole concept of the shoot through plexi and using greenery to obfuscate and to kind of give it a little bit more mystery and a little more texture was exactly what I wanted to accomplish, and it's exactly what this image is to me.
Yeah, it works really, really well. And then here's exactly the same type of technique without the
Yes,
plexiglass. And again,
exactly.
it works like a charm.
Yeah, and you're seeing a lot of options here, which I think is really key for my client and for myself as well. You know, you don't, having never photographed the person before, so it's a new person in a new environment, and uh, and you don't have a lot of control over what they're wearing or what mood they're in or anything. So you have so little control that, to me, going in and with the desire to walk away with a variety of options and kind of really focus in on what works in the moment and what works after the fact is really, really important. And I think it's one of the big reasons I get hired consistently and over again by places like the New York Times and the Washington Post, is because, you know, I think they sent me in there. She sent me in there to get one or two different pictures, and we walked away with like 7 or 8 different options that were that were extremely usable and distinctly different options, not just different facial expressions,
Right.
different clothing, different, like you said, with flare, without flare, film, digital. You know, you saw before the picture with the sun directly through her fingers, and then we went over and tried some without a backdrop. So I definitely wanted to walk away with a variety, because I think a variety really gives, as long as your variety is anchored by your vision, you know, it does nothing but help your client to be able to make choices on their end.
Well, this is really great, Jesse. Now I do have a question. This was a feature, not a breaking news story. So you had
Yeah.
time to get the film processed. How long does that normally take from the time that you drop the film off at the lab to the time you have a usable scan to bring into Photoshop and finish? Or Lightroom?
I
I don't
mean,
know which you use.
yeah, I'm using primarily Photoshop. I use a lot of different programs. It's, my workflow is a little bit constantly changing. It's a moving target. But for handling the negatives, I bring them into Photoshop and then make adjustments there. But you know, I would say on average it takes uh, between 3 and 5 business days for it all to be accomplished. You know, that timeline can really speed up if we really need it to. But you know, I like to be fair to the people that help me out, my lab, and the people that develop and scan for me. So I don't like to put the pressure on them if I don't have to. And I would say on average we get stuff done in about 3 to 5 days. Um, so it's certainly not the immediacy of digital.
Well, you manage that expectation with your client up front, right?
Absolutely. And you know, I think that one of the reasons why I really brand the film as an added value, an added bonus, and that I'm going there to accomplish the goal of getting a really intimate, connected portrait with the subject that they've asked me to photograph, and that I'm going to do that, and it doesn't matter whether that's going to be film or digital. And if they have a deadline that doesn't mesh up with my digital, excuse me, with my film workflow, then I'll just get them the film as soon as possible. And if they can make it work, that's great. And I will always get them the digital in the amount of time that they need it. So yeah, I'm a big manager of expectations. I'm all about hitting my deadlines on time. I'm all about overestimating my deadlines and then hitting them early. It's my favorite thing to do, is to tell someone they're going to get something on Thursday and then give it to them on midday Wednesday. I think it's one of the key things to do. It makes everyone feel good to get something in early, even if it's even if you're the person that set the deadline.
Right.
So I purposely set deadlines that I can beat, because I think that it makes everybody look good.
Well, I think that's incredibly smart. We've got about 3 minutes left before we're going to wrap this up. So I've got a question about your book. On those photographs, how many of them in the book, just percentage-wise, roughly, are digital versus film?
Oh, they're almost all film. It's film work. Yeah, it's my favorite film work. And the film is my passion project. The film is my personal work. People ask what my personal, there was this kind of moment through the industry where everyone was really focused on, well, what's your personal project? What's your personal work? What would you do if this wasn't your job, and it was just something that you could do? And my answer is that is what I would do. I would try to meet people who are affecting the world and changing the world, and are important to the rest of us at large, and I would try to photograph them, even if I wasn't getting paid to do it. So my personal work, it is the work I get to do on a daily basis, which is fantastic. And my preferred way to photograph is with the film camera. So it really is just kind of like the lowest common denominator, unfiltered. These are my favorite pictures. These are the ones that I would choose. No editor, no other person that my work is being filtered through that before you see it. And that was my goal when I made the book.
Okay, one last question that goes back to the original topic of the webinar, the COVID-19. What is your advice for other people that are wanting to photograph people during these times, and how can they do it safely?
Absolutely. I think that, the first thing to do is is to communicate and set expectations and ground rules with the people that you're photographing and yourself. What kind of risk level are you comfortable with? What kind of risk level is the person that you're photographing comfortable with? Making sure that that everything is known beforehand, so that when you actually get to the business of doing a photo shoot, you can focus on that and less on the insanity and anxiety of what's going on in the world. So communication is the number one thing. And then beyond that, it's really being introspective and figuring out what's the best and highest quality work that you can accomplish with the least amount of production. What can you do as a photographer and to make amazing pictures without using anybody's help on set? Or if you need someone's help on set, if you have to pick one person, who's that person and why? And really, really boiling down, because there's not going to be such a thing anymore of 10-person crews for a single portrait. It's just not going to happen. And I've been there. I've done plenty of shoots where I've had that many people just to photograph one person. It's just not happening anymore. It's just not going to happen. So the question becomes, who's essential to making your work? And photographers that can say truly that their work is going to can look as professional and can fit with their previous body of work with the fewest people possible are the people that are in the driver's seat right now, as far as continuing to work.
Okay, I'm going to have you look in your crystal ball. Do you think that once we're through the pandemic, the vaccine has been given out to most of the world, and we're not really worried about getting infected because there are successful treatments, do you think photography is ever going to go back to the big production portrait?
I would say that, yeah, I would say eventually, yes. I think there's a reason why we got there. I think that there was peak production, that we may have peaked as an industry already, even before COVID. I think that, peak photography production was probably sometime in the 90s into the early 2000s, where you had the biggest crews and kind of the biggest budgets. Probably sometime in the 90s, actually, not even into the 2000s, maybe the 80s and 90s. The really the peak Annie Leibovitz, Mark Seliger cover of Rolling Stone, Vanity Fair era, where we were having film crews basically in photography. Those shoots were already happening much less. because people realize that they can get a certain amount of quality with a less production. And that it also became less fashionable to have that giant production for a photograph. So I think that what clients and brands and publications will know is that if they pick talented photographers with broad, smart skill sets and good visual skill sets and good visual taste and talent, that is mostly what they need in order to get their job done. And so I think that crews will stay small because they'll realize that, hey, we have to pick photographers that are really good and skilled and broadly skilled who don't need to rely on a ton of assistance. And once those people are in these client cycles, it's hard to get them out because there's a lot of trust that goes into it. And once you find someone you like, once you find someone that you trust, you want to keep using them because they make you look good. So you know, I think that certainly for a while, the ripple effects and the wave of how productions will shrink will stay in the industry for quite a while. And it's just a question of when does the aesthetic that coincides with a big production come back? It's hard to say. It will eventually. You know, some brand in the future will be like, I need to get the person that does the thing. And that person will be like, in order for me to do the thing, I need the people. And when that happens, we will again see larger productions. But I have to believe that that's not for quite a while.
I agree with you. Jesse Dittmar, it has been an absolute joy and pleasure to have you on a Photo Focus webinar, and I hope you'll consider coming back.
I'll be back anytime you want me.
Wonderful. I think I'd like to go through some of those photographs of your book and hear some of the select stories. Until then, I wish you well, good health, good business, and thank you for joining us. For everyone else, thank you all very much for being here, and I hope you enjoy this. And if you want to see it again, the video will be posted on YouTube shortly. Thanks, everyone. Remember to go to photofocus.com/celebrate and enter the contest and get your free photo toolkit. I'm Kevin Ames for Photo Focus. Have a wonderful, wonderful time.
Thanks, Kevin.
You're welcome, Jesse.